Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for watching. So today what we're going to do is take a look at the useState hook and the useEffect hook. Going to go over, a few options, and we're going to do a few um, example projects and examples to show you how to use useState and useEffect a little bit better. Okay? Thanks, guys. So thanks for tuning in. So here's what we're looking at. React hooks. Perhaps you've heard of it. If you haven't, basically, hooks are what we can use in functional components. You can only use them in functional components. You cannot use them in class-based components. However, you can use hooks in functional components that you use in class components, but they have to be used in the functional component, if that makes sense. Anyway, here's the page for the documentation. Sort of gives you a little brief breakdown, and it gives you all this information, which is great. We're just going to be going over two because this could easily be an hour-long video. So we're just going to pick the two most popular ones. But here's the documentation for that. Okay. So let's come over here. And so basically what I did was I used npx, create React app, and I just created this test app, and I went ahead and cleaned up the files. I emptied the CSS, and then I added back in my own, which, by the way, this project will be up on my GitHub, link in the description if you're curious. I just cleaned everything out, got rid of all the excess stuff I don't need. One thing I want to do is just run this and make sure that it does indeed start up, and then I'll go over the rest of the setup of what I have so far. Let me just run it. Thanks for watching, guys. Much appreciated. Hope you're having a good week. I'm a little tired, so if I start rambling, forgive me. This should be going anytime soon. All right, while that's running, let's go over. So the only other thing I did was I put my bootstrap CDN in my index.html file, and I think that's all I did. I just did that just to make it look a little better for you guys. So I think that's all I did. I just said, you don't have to do that. I just did just to make it look a little nicer. We're not even going to be using that much bootstrap, but just for the buttons and stuff, it's just easier. We're going to be creating some buttons and some click events to update state, but I want to go over the sort of finer points for beginners for useState and useEffect, because most React developers, especially in the beginning stages, that's what you're going to be using a fair amount. Okay, there we go. All right, so my CSS, I just made it the background this gray color, and it changed my title. All right, so we're running. Let's get started. I'm going to close this index.html file. So we're not going to do anything inside the app.js file for right now. I am going to create a folder, call it components. Okay. Let's take a look at our first example. We're going to start with our state. So I'm going to create a file inside the components folder called colors.js. Okay. Now I have this extension installed, ES7 Redux GraphQL snippets, which allows me to type RAF and then select RAFCE, and it gives me a React functional component. Okay. It gives me the boilerplate for that, which is nice. I also have my Emmet formatted so that I can do things like type a div with a class of container, and it'll give me like that. That's Emmet. It comes standard on VS Code. If you have a little problem with that, which I did, it wasn't working for me. I went to settings, extensions, Emmet, and then edit in settings JSON, and I added this little Emmet.include languages, JavaScript React, and then it worked for me. And I was all good, and I was able to, because I had it, and then it wasn't working, and that was the problem. So let's get started. So we're going to import our two hooks. First is useState, second is useEffect. And if you bring these in and don't use them, React will give you a warning, but it's not a big deal. All right, so the useState hook. So instead of a class, I'm just going to create some space. Instead of class components where we have a constructor and then we pass in the super, pass in props, and then we do this.state, and there's a need to bind things using the this keyword. There's a lot, and it can be intimidating. useState is pretty darn easy compared to class-based component state, which I will show you. So we're going to create a constant, and we're going to call it color. That's the name of the state. And then we're going to assign a function to it when we want to update the state. We're going to call that setColor. And it's going to be equal to useState. That's it. That's our state. The constructor, the super, well, okay, we're not passing in props that you would do up here.
That's not right.
Okay, so that's it. But we have to, well, we don't have to, but you should assign a value, an initial value to our state, right? Now let's just, as an experiment, let's just give a JSS expression by two curly braces, and we're going to print out our state. So we'll just write in here red for now as our initial state. And also don't forget, in order for this to work, we have to bring in import colors from dot slash components slash color is the only one in there. And then we have to put it in here as a HTML element or JSX element, actually. Oh, sorry, it should be colors. Use effects, that color, don't worry about that. We'll fix that later. And there we go. There's our state, right? Just a word, not a big deal. So at least we know it works, okay? Let's close this app for now. So that's it. So normally we set it to nothing, right? An empty expression. You can set it to numbers, right? You can set it to numbers, and there you go. Not a big deal. You can set it to true, a Boolean. Oops. Pretty much any of the, oops, pretty much any of the data types. It doesn't show. Well, whatever. Or you could set it to an empty object, an empty array. If you're getting an array, say from a endpoint like we're going to, okay. But for this, we're gonna just uh, have it as an empty string. Now, one thing you can do, and this is advised if you have a really complex piece of state, is you put it in a function. Because sometimes like this, rewriting over the state can kind of get a little funky. So we create a constant we're going to create a function called colors. It's going to equal a function, and I'm using an arrow function. And then we're just going to return our state. Like if, for example, you could have color, oops, color could be set to an empty string. You could have tone of the color set to true or something like that. You could have saturation set to, a number or something like that. Uh, but let me show you. We'll just say for right now, it's just an empty string of color, and then you would put in here colors, and it should still work. Well, oh, we didn't put anything. Let's say it's red. Oh, color. Oh, I'm sorry. This should just be red as our initial state. And we don't need this. Semicolon. Sorry, there we go. So you just return the state, and there we go, it's red. So just to recap, so you create a function, return this, uh, and that's that, right? And then you put it in here. But for right now, we don't need to do that. We have a really simple state. I'll leave this here, and it'll be in the documentation so you can reference it later. Now, so we have our color. I'm gonna cut that and put an H4 just to give it some delineation. Then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to create some buttons. Button dot btn dot btn dash, say primary. Okay, and we'll say blue. And then I'll come down and create another button. Dot btn dash success. So when you want to add multiple classes, you just separate them by a dot. Call this green button. Create a third button. Button .btn dash danger. Call that red. Okay, let's take a look real quick. We should be good. Yeah, here's our three buttons. I'm just going to add another class of margin dash 2 just to separate it. Margin dash 2 just to keep it away from everything. Margin and that this M dash 2 is bootstrap stuff, as is this BTN. So we can, so there you go. Three buttons, does nothing. I'm going to go ahead and bring up our console. Console. Don't worry about this. We'll fix that later. It's not actually a problem. It's just because we haven't used it. Okay, so what we're going to attempt to do is change our state through these buttons. Okay, and then we're also going to add in our useEffect. Okay, so let's real quick, let's add an on-click event. Oops, on-click, and we're going to set it to a callback function, or a function rather. And we're going to use that. Remember this function that we called, or that we created to change our color state? We're going to do that now. Set color, and we're going to set it to blue. So we're going to set the empty string to a string of blue for that. So whenever this button is pressed, it's going to set our state from an empty string to a string of blue. I'm going to come here. I'm going to change this to green. And then I'm going to, this last one, yep, you guessed it, red. Oops. Red. Okay, so let's come down here. We're going to console.log our state. Oh, actually, never mind. We're printing it out here. I forgot. Sorry. Forget that. We're already printing it out here. So let's save it. All right, we got no errors. Blue, green, red, blue. Okay, so we're changing our state. Not a big deal. Don't worry about this. We're all good. useEffect is, don't worry about that. Okay, so you may be saying, great, that's what we wanted. Okay, but our component is not necessarily changing. The state is changing, and that's great. But so let's bring in our useEffect, or let's use our useEffect. Right? Say we want to do something where we're updating the state, right? Like making an API call, right? So let's do useEffect, and we'll set the first parameter is a function, arrow function in this case. Let's just say console.log. You could do anything in here, but we're just going to console.log and say color was changed. Oops, changed. I can't spell. Changed. Now we need to set this, the second parameter, to an empty array. For now, we're going to change that, but for now we're going to set it to an empty array. Otherwise, it will continue to load. So what happens is useEffect is what you use when you want a side effect to happen, okay, to something else, right? So we're affecting something else with useEffect, okay? And it's a function, but if you don't reset it to an empty array, okay, to this array, it's going to create a continuous loop and it's going to error out. But since we set it to an empty array, great, we're running successful. And let's reload. And there you go, color was changed. So there's our useEffect. Now you'll notice that useEffect doesn't re-render, right? Say we were pressing red, and I'll show you in the next example with our API. We're going to use an API in the next one. Uh, say we wanted to get info from the New York Times, the Huffington Post, and the Washington Post, right? Those APIs wouldn't get called. It would just change it, or it wouldn't change it, I'm sorry. So we're kind of lost. So what we do is we go in here, and instead of an empty array, this can be an array of whatever you want to change, whatever you want the component to remount or update. So we're going to take our color state. So anytime this state of color changes or gets changed, the useEffect is going to re-render. If you leave this blank, the useEffect only happens on the initial render of the component, right? But if you add in something to change it, like our state, which gets updated when we press the button, the useEffect gets fired off every time this color state changes, right? So let me show you. Did I save it? No, I didn't save it. I gotta save. Save, we're good, no errors. So as you can see, red, green, every time this number is going up because the useEffect is changing. However, right, I'm pressing red. It says red. Let me reload. Okay, so I'm going to press green, right? We get color was changed. I'm going to press green again. The number didn't change. So the useEffect is only firing off because right now the state is green. If I click green again, the state is still green. It hasn't changed, so the useEffect doesn't fire. If I hit red, now we get another color was changed. If I hit blue, we get another color was changed. If I hit blue again, we don't get another color was changed. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And it should make more sense in our next example. So that's it for the colors. Again, this will be in my GitHub uh, repository, and I will put the link to that in the description. I am going to create a new file, and we're going to call this info, just because I couldn't think of anything else to call it. RAF to create a React functional component with export. Okay, the comment, we're going to bring in again our, in curly braces, use state, excuse me, and use effect again, because obviously we need that. Now, here we go, the big hurrah. Now, let's create some state similar to the last one. Let me give us some space. We're going to create, we're going to call this resource. And we're going to say set, resource. Usually this function here, resource. Okay, sorry, I can't type. Usually this function here to update our state is usually camel case, which means the first letter is lowercase and the subsequent letters are uppercase. Equals use state. And we're going to set that to an empty string. Just like here, our colors, set color, empty string. Right? Now, let's see. Okay, we're going to create some more buttons. I'm going to come down in here in our div. I'll put another H4. We'll call this get our info. Okay. Now I'm going to create only two buttons here. Button I don't know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really need, we'll say btn dot btn dash primary dot margin 2, and we're going to call this posts because we're going to get some posts. Okay, I'm going to button a second button dot btn dash, we'll call this, we'll make this green. Oops, success dot margin dash 2 just to give it a little bit of margin, and we're going to call this one comments. Okay. Now you may be asking, what the heck are we doing? And you're going to see how that use state really helps us out here. Okay. Um, hmm. Okay. So we need an on-click event, obviously, otherwise this is pointless and it's not going to do anything. So what we're going to do here is give it a function parameter, and we're going to set our resource to a string called posts. And you'll see what I'm getting at as I go along, so just pay attention. On click event again, and we're going to set it to a function here. Again, set resource to a string called comments. Okay, so that's going to update this state. Now, let's print that out. Let's print our resource out just so I could show you, just so you follow along. Let me close this colors, and let me add in, I'm going to comment this out, and I'm going to comment this at import out. Okay, it'll all be in my uh, uh, GitHub repo. So look for that description. Look for that link in the description. Uh, import info from dot slash component slash. We want the info component, and we're just going to put this down here. Info. Close that off. See if we're going. Don't worry about this. That's just a warning. All right, great. Here, we get our posts, comments, posts. So clearly we see that our close that. We see that our state is working and our on clicks are working because it's changing the state to this and then to this when we click that, right? Cool. Let me just bring this down so you can see. Good. Sometimes it helps to see these separated. Cool. Yeah, good. Bring that down one. All right, cool. Now, so why would we need to do that? Why do we need to watch when this state changes? Well, if we want to fetch something from an API. So let's add in our useEffect again. useEffect here, right? And open it up just like that. Okay. Now we're going to do a fetch because I don't feel like installing Axios. Now, normally you do single quotes, but I'm going to do backticks. That's the little notch to the left of your number 1 on your keyboard. And then I'll just create the rest of my fetch. Dot then, say res or response here. And you have to, because we're using fetch, you got to set it to JSON. I have an Axios versus fetch video, which I'll link in the description. Dot then, and we're just going to res. Is going to set to what? We didn't do anything. We're going to create another piece of state to house our results of our API call, and we're going to call that state. Yes, you can call it state. Set state. Oops, state. And we're going to set it to use state. Don't get confused. This is just a variable to house our state. This is a function to change our state. This is the actual use state hook. Okay. We're going to set this to an empty array, so empty brackets, because what our API returns is an array. And our API is going to be this. And I'm sure you've seen it before. Our old trusty friend, jasonplaceholder.tapingcode.com. Now, depending on where, I'll show you. Console.log. We're just going to console.log the results, and we're going to save posts. Save all. And there we go. Here's our results from our JSON typing code, right? Pretty common. You've probably seen that before. Right? But say we wanted to use our buttons to get comments, right? Right? And we go to our results, and here's our comments. But with this method, we can only get one or the other, posts or comments. We can't get both. Or can we? So let's do this, delete here. Now, the reason I put template strings in here is so that I can dynamically insert a variable with a $sign and curly braces. And can you guess? Set it to our resource state. Okay. Now, you might be able to guess in here, inside this array of things we want to watch our resource. So every time our resource state changes, we want to remount our component. Okay? And then down here, I'm going to put our state. Now, we have to do something. We have to change all that JSON data into a string. So I'm just going to say let data. Normally, you wouldn't do this. You would map through it and put it into a list or design it or whatever you're going to do. But just for design, just for a demonstration purpose, I'm going to do this stringify. I have plenty of React apps tutorials, so you can follow those where we get info from an API. And then down here, I'm going to print out the data, which is taking our state and stringifying the JSON data. Right? Now, hopefully this should work. So just to recap, our resource is controlling what this is. Our resource is just an empty string, and then once this button is clicked, it's replaced with comments or posts. Then we use that state in our useEffect to change our fetch. We watch for when the resource changes, we watch for when this string changes, and every time it does, the component is going to update with the new information based on what's inside the resource. And again, this is just for demonstration purposes. These are our buttons to change, and this is just printing out our stringified data. Let's see if it works. Set state. Oh, I didn't set state. Oh, okay. Sorry, guys. So instead of console.logging it, we're going to set state to the results. Pretty standard fetch. Compiled successfully. All right, let's see. Oh, you know what? Let me just put this inside a div. Div.container. We just put that inside a div so it gives us a little delineation so you can see. So it puts it on the next line. Now, so right now it's empty. Syntax error. Just one. Don't worry about that. Let's see. Get our posts. There's all our posts. Comments. There's all our comments, right? So every time we get that, and if you reload, it goes back to empty, of course, it resets. Here, boom. Okay, that's that. Hopefully that makes sense, guys. So we're watching for when the state changes, and then we're using effect to affect our fetch, thus printing out a different result based on the buttons. Don't forget, you can have a function to display your state, or you can type it in here if you have a small amount of state. But if it gets too complicated, like if you have an object with, colors, a bunch of stuff. Uh, Completed, true, stuff like that. If you have like a bunch of things in there, it's better to return it as a function or return it inside a function. Other than that, guys, I hope you were able to get something out of this. If you were, please leave a like below. If you have any follow-up questions or suggestions, please leave it in the comments below, and I will get back to you very quickly. I promise. If you found this video helpful in any way, please subscribe, turn on the notifications, and that's it, guys. Hopefully that helped you in some way. That's it. I'm done. Take care of yourself and each other. See ya.